This episode is sponsored by Arana Stay, the digital guest guide of the future. Say goodbye to the hassle of traditional welcome packs and say hello to a seamless and unforgettable digital experience for your guest with Arana's fully branded guest experience app. Boost your revenue with powerful features and focus on what you do best, whilst Arana Stay takes care of the rest. Visit aranastay.com to find out more. Okay, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Accommodation Show. I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Heather Bayar on this episode. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Bart. It's an absolute pleasure to get my own back.
That's right, because I have been on your podcast a couple of times. We had the fortune of meeting each other almost 6 months ago now in Miami at the bookdirect show. Struck up a bit of a conversation, and actually we've got to know each other a bit better through doing these podcasts, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the huge benefits, isn't it, of going to these conferences, is that you meet the people you've been talking to for a while online, and then that relationship tends to blossom after that, and continues, which I love. And it made it much easier for me to approach you and say, come on the podcast, because we'd met in person. So that's a shout out for going to conferences.
There you go. That's right. And look, it's so important, right? Because you're building, you're growing, and that sort of thing. And that's why I actually have you on the show today, because as I've got to know you, I've got to know your story and your journey probably better than I would have had I not met you or had we not done these episodes. And your story is really fascinating about you coming into a new industry, and then you're one of the ones that sold out, or not sold out, but sold your business and got out of sort of the operational side. And that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to start a short-term rental business and how you have done it, and then how you get out of it at the end. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yes, me too. I learned a lot along the way, so I'll share what I can.
Yeah, awesome. So look, how about you kick us off and just sort of give us a bit of a background as to you, what you're doing right now, and then maybe just sort of how you got into the industry.
Which one do you want me to start with first? 25 years ago or now?
Yeah, how about you, what you're doing right now?
What I'm doing right now is my sort of passion project, because I've had 25 years in the industry, and I have shared everything I've done over the past 25 years as best I can while I've been running a property management company. And now I have the time and the energy to go all into what I love to do, which is training and education, because that's going right back to my roots. I ran a training company 25 years ago, and now 25 years later I am back doing training again, but within the short-term rental business, which could not be better.
Yeah, and it's such a good space to be doing it right now, because one is that I think there's a real lack of knowing who to actually trust in terms of getting your education and your information, but also on the other side, there's just so much interest in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I talked to a property manager a couple of weeks ago for the podcast, and he said, the one thing is that there's no university for going to get a short-term rental education. And I said, hold on, hang on. There are some really decent people out there, myself included, that know what they're doing. They've been in the business a long time, and they're teaching this. And I'm really happy to be part of that group. There's so much out there at the moment. I know you've seen it, Bart. Somebody's been in the business for 6 months, and they're going to tell you how to earn $1 million on Airbnb almost overnight without lifting a finger, and that bothers the heck out of me.
Yeah, and look, I think that that isn't just a a short-term rental thing. I think that that's across many different industries that you've got people that come in and make all sorts of promises of different dreams, and I think the realities can be quite different once you start to add up all the numbers and you realize how much work it actually is and what skill sets you actually need to run a business like this one. Because the one thing that they don't tell you is how many different moving parts there are.
Yeah, nobody told me that. When I got into property management 25 years ago, there was nobody around. And just a brief background to that. I was living in England. I was CEO of a management training company, and we trained mostly in customer service and marketing. And we were doing very nicely, and I had no reason to think I would do anything else. And then I went to Canada on vacation. We came out to Canada to go to a wedding, or a couple of weddings, and I went and stayed in a cottage on a lake. And it was dire, although we had a wonderful time, but it was... and there's a long story to that, and I do have an origin story that I can share at some other time. But basically, at the end of this vacation, I looked at this rundown little property that we just stayed in for a week, and I figured I could do this, and I could do this better. So I went back to England and started buying properties in Ontario, in Canada. And within 3 years, we'd emigrated. My husband had been in the military for 35 years, so was coming up to retirement. And bless him, he followed my flag. I've been following his flag for 30 years, and he followed mine. And we started a business in Ontario.
Yeah, wow. So the first step for you was sort of identifying a problem and that you would be able to solve it. And then from there, did you say that you bought some properties in Canada, and then how did you make the decision to buy them rather than maybe trying to find someone else's properties to manage?
Well, we started buying our own, and I had no intention at the outset of getting into managing third-party properties. But just like just about everybody I talk to on my podcast, you always start with your own property, and then people start coming along and saying, hey, you're doing really well at this. Would you manage mine as well? And that's what happened to a greater extent. I found a business partner who had been managing a listing site for the previous 6 or 7 years, and it was the first listing site in Ontario. And he had been listing properties, and then he was fielding a lot of inquiries from the homeowners who were listing on his site, who said, this is great to have this service, but I don't want to do the management myself. I don't want to be dealing with people's problems and issues. So Craig came to me because I'd been sourcing out some of his properties to see what they were like, and he came to me and asked if I'd be interested in taking on board the management side, and we went into partnership, and that was a partnership that went on for 20 years.
Wow. Okay. So this part is quite important, and for those that are listening, we'll circle through different topics and different ideas in terms of starting a business, and then we'll the middle part of all the management and things is not going to be for this particular episode, but I really want to focus on that getting started, so that if you're listening, like, what can you do right now, and where are we going to go? And then we'll do this sort of the thought, thinking about exiting a business and what that looks like. But I really want to focus in on that for a second, that whole idea of finding a business partner and what that partnership means and what it meant for you, because it can make or break your business, and it can be quite uncomfortable as well. So to set the scene here, you've got a few properties that you've bought yourself. Were you managing any other properties before you got into this partnership?
My sister's.
Okay.
My sister had one, so I was managing hers.
Yeah.
That's often how it starts. You have your own, and then
Sure.
your relatives come along and your neighbours.
Yeah.
But yes, so I met up with my future business partner and we decided we would have a half-hour meeting, and just explore some ideas. And 3.5 hours later, we were still talking. And I think that's the very first thing. You know, we hit it off straight away. And we were also very, very different people. And I think, you know, this does not work. This partnership doesn't work if you find somebody who is exactly like you, because you're going to be missing some of the component parts that are really needed to make a business partnership work. You have to have different styles and bring differences to the conversation, if you like. So he was very technical and detail oriented, and I've always been the strategy person. So everything was from the top down, and for Craig, everything was the bottom up. So in 20 years of the partnership, I would come up. One of the things he hated for me to say was, "I have an idea." Because he knew what went on from that. It was some far-fetched idea that was going to make oodles of money, and he would then come in with, "This is why it's not going to work." But that really is, if I was offering any advice to somebody who was going into partnership, is beware that meeting of minds where you both get so excited about it because you're both coming from the same position. And if you do that, well, that's all very well and good, but you're going to have to spend time finding people who are going to fill the missing gaps, or fill the gaps.
Yeah.
You've got to have a detail person.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. You're trying to find someone, like, what the question is, why you bring the business partner in. What is, apart from someone to talk to in general, and if you're talking about the same things, then it might not be beneficial, or as beneficial as it could be, is if someone can tackle things from a different angle, or fill some of the skill sets that you might not be as good at or as comfortable with. So if you're not great with customer service or dealing with customers, it's great to have someone that can do that. If someone's good at social media and marketing, if someone's really great operationally or technically, it's great to bring in that skill set to be able to sort of complement what you're doing and also push back on you a little bit. So you need that level of trust. But then from your perspective, so you're getting into this partnership, and if someone, sometimes people it can go both ways. We can say, "Oh, I've got to do this and I need to find a business partner." Or then there's others that are saying, "No, I don't need a business partner," to their own detriment. So you can go those two different paths. When we talk about a partnership, how do we make sure that we get onto the same page quickly and that we get to a stage where we understand each other commercially, right? So that you're saying, well, this is how this is going to be structured, this is how we're going to divide things up, and not get too stuck in that process of setting it all up. What are the first steps you kind of, now having done it, you'd say to the next person, this is what you need to do to form a partnership?
You mentioned the word trust. And for me, it comes as a gut feeling. You know, if you should know from the outset if something's going to work for you. And this was not my first rodeo. With my management training company, I was in partnership with a very similar person because I knew what I was missing, that I could have the ideas, but I needed somebody to help me implement them. And I knew that I could not do this myself. But it had to be the right person that I would also get along with.
Brilliant. So, look, one of the things that's really fascinating to me when trying to figure out having a partner is how it's going to work in a practical sense. So one of the things we've talked about already is how we identify someone. We've got the trust part of it, but how do we figure it out commercially? Because you might have already part of the business built. They might come in and they've got none of the business built, or they're just bringing in their skill set. Then you've got, you guys are just sharing ideas. How do you figure out how much work each person's meant to be doing on the business? How do we divide it 50-50? Two questions. One is, if you were to, how did you guys set it up? And then the second one would be, how would you recommend someone else to do it if they were to just get started?
Yeah, I think it's going to be really different for every person. I mean, when I started with Craig, he still had a full-time job. He was a database manager and he was still working full-time. So really, I started the business with 100% of the workload. And then it wasn't until about four years down the line, I think, when he quit his day job and joined me and came in as a 50-50 partnership. So he wasn't, you know, it's a long time going back, you know, how we worked out the division of payment, and I honestly can't remember. Probably didn't pay myself in the first year or so anyway. But once, and that was a little bit of a difficult time when, you know, I had to give up 50% because we'd started as a, you know, I would take 100% and really do the property management side while he continued with his listing site. And really, I was managing the company, and all I was using of his, and what he was giving to me was his list, and you know, everything that he'd worked towards with his listing. So he was sending me the clients, and then I was managing them. But quite honestly, Bart, you know, it's an interesting question because I can't honestly remember how we did it.
Yeah, but one of the critical pieces here, from what I've heard you say, is that from the outset, you guys had decided to 50-50 the business in terms of the ownership. So you probably would have set up some sort of a business, PTY Ltd, or I think a partnership agreement, and off we go.
Yes, we had a partnership agreement, and I think that came probably about 2 or 3 years in. So it was very loose at the outset. And I think before that, he didn't have much input into the business, and he didn't take much of the output either. But once we had the partnership agreement in place, and I, you know, it started out as a boilerplate partnership agreement, but we had to work in things like, what happens if something happened to me? What would happen with the business? What would happen if something happened to him? You know, I couldn't say, okay, you know, Craig got run over by a bus, therefore the business is now mine, because of course it's a 50-50 agreement. So there was a lot,
and all of a sudden you're working with his kids, right?
That's right. So there was a lot to work out with that, and we went through a lot of scenarios, what if scenarios. And, you know, really coming to the end of the business, we're so glad that we did have that in place at the outset. And there's a few other things that we had in place that made it very helpful when we got to the end. You know, we always had an exit strategy in mind from the very, very beginning. And I think that is...
Let's talk about that. So the exit strategy... it's something that whenever I start a new consultation with a new client, someone that's in short-term rentals, they might be at 5 properties, 1 property, 100 properties. The first thing I ask is, where are we going with this? What is the exit strategy? Are you looking for this to be a lifestyle business that you're going to run until you retire? Are you looking to sell it in 5 years? What kind of lifestyle do you want behind it? So from what you're saying, there was an exit already at the very start without you even really knowing what the business is going to look like. Tell me about that.
Well, I think we discussed it annually, every year when we get together, usually at the end of the season. When we'd get together, we'd talk about how the season went, so looking back and looking forward to the next year, setting our goals, but we also then updated the exit strategy. You know, let's talk about when we're going to bail out of this. Is it likely to be next year? Is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be 10 years? What are our thoughts? So we had these very informal discussions each year in a sort of like informal formal, if you like, because we did it every year and we included it in that discussion. And it was pretty informal until we got to the last couple of years. And I think we probably talked about selling for maybe 5 years before we actually did. But because And I think, yeah, I just want to come on to that because 5 years before we actually sold, we got into one of these discussions and said, okay, if we sold next year, do we have everything in place to make this a successful sale? And we realized that we did not, because we could not be replaced. So that's that 5 years before we sold, we hired a person who would become our general manager, who would know everything about the business. So when we sold the business, we weren't going to be, you know, because we were then out of it, that wasn't going to have a huge impact on the sale price, because it would have been if we didn't have a general manager. But we made that decision 5 years before we sold. Our general manager was in place. She knew everything about the business. We would be able to then walk away. She would be able to continue, and the buyer could come in and not actually have to do anything themselves.
Yeah.
Because the staff were all in place to take the business forward without us. And I think that was so critical that we decided that in enough years prior to the sale.
Yeah. And I've done a few podcasts already about selling a business, and every single time I've talked to someone that knows this space, they say, start preparing now. And it can be as simple as getting all of your numbers written down and doing them properly, having a good P&L so that you understand what's actually going on in your business, and looking at the different elements that a potential buyer will be looking at when they come to you and they say, so, hey, we want to buy your business. What is the business? And that's, I think, where a lot of people say, well, I know what it is in my head, I know what it is in my brain. But actually, if you start to put it down onto paper and you start going, well, what do all the management agreements look like with all of my different clients? Have I got one agreement, or have I got 20 different ones for different clients, and they're all worth different numbers? What is the lifetime value of a customer? All of these questions we start to sort of put in, and you don't have to have, like, when you're just starting, you don't have to have all of this stuff written down and sorted, but as long as you know what it is, you'll know when you come to exit what people will be looking for, because you want to get paid, right? You don't want to build a business just to get paid today. You want to get paid out at the end for all those hours of extra work that you've done, and also because you've probably got something which is worth something to a potential buyer in the future.
Just getting all the ducks in a row way before even considering a sale is the key. And you know, we went through 4 months of due diligence, and, you know, going through absolutely every aspect of our business, and we had everything to hand. 3 or 4 years of general accounts, of course we had that, but, you know, owners going back 3 or 4 years. Why did this owner
Leave?
Quit? Why did they leave? Why was this year better than that year? And we had all the answers. And it wasn't really until we went through that due diligence that we realized that, you know, it was because we had been diligent in the key performance indicators and making sure that every year we looked at our performance, we measured everything, and we documented everything. And I hadn't realised how valuable that was until it got to the end.
On that, as your because obviously you said that your business partner is more the diligent kind of side of the business regardless, and would have been probably looking after a lot of these things and making sure that you're all on track. How valuable is it to be on top of all of this, even if you weren't to sell the business?
I would say that from the moment you start your business, you keep all those records. It's a business plan that is updated every single year, because, you know, at any point in time, then you can look at your performance and say, you know, what happened that year, because compared to 2 years ago, there was a big difference. You know, what was our churn like? Why was our churn a higher percentage in this year than it was in another year? But if you don't keep those records year on year, then you just don't have anything to make comparisons with. So regardless of, maybe you've got family and you're just going to hand everything on to your family. It doesn't matter. You still need to keep that business plan going, because you can look back at any time, and it will give that really valuable information, and it helps you to project forward as well.
Yeah. Wow, look, I'm so cognizant of our time. We're smashing through time, and I've just got so many questions for you. So this part of really understanding your business to be able to create value, of thinking about the exit consistently through your business is key. So, of course, you guys, within your minds, you had decided that exit is going to be necessary at some point soon. So you start to tidy things up and make sure that you've got all the data points that you need, and make sure and kind of understand whether the business would be attractive to someone. What's the next step for someone in terms of, all right, we know that we want to sell, we've started to tidy things up. What, in your circumstance, what was the next step in terms of approaching potential buyers? Or I mean, yeah, you tell me. What happened next?
Yeah, it's we struggled with that, because if we'd been in the US, there's a number of specific short-term rental valuers, and we would have jumped at going to somebody like Ben Edwards or Jacoby Olin, and there's a couple, and a couple of the other vacation rental company brokers that there are out there. And I did talk to Jacoby, and I talked to Ben as well before we sold, and to ask about valuation. And of course, we're in a different country though, and it was different.
Yeah.
So
not
we
apples
went.
to apples.
Yeah, we went to. We found a small business broker, because we had to find somebody who's going to go out and find us the buyer. So we went to a small business broker. We had the company valued, and then they also had a sales division, and within 2 weeks of them posting the business for sale, we'd sent out the 50th NDA.
Wow. Wow.
But I created the business brochure, because the people that we were using did not know the business. So we had to educate them on what the business was about. And I did that through our business brochure, which really came out of the business plan that we did from year on year. We had all the figures that we could put into the business brochure, and that's just another benefit of keeping that business plan going. So yes, they put it out in the open market. We had, as I say, 50 interested parties, and then we went through interview process, that was a huge surprise for me. I had no idea that once you sent out an NDA and we sent out the some additional information, that then people wanted to talk to us. And we were in a position then of choosing who was going to buy our company, and we went through 3 to 4 hour interviews with these prospective buyers. Wow! And so this time this time last year, and I remember doing it.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. You would have thought that when you sell a house, you don't interview people. You just whoever's going to pay the most amount of money, that's who we go for, right? Why are we interviewing people to sell our business? Like, of course, you want to, your own ego maybe, or I want this to go on, or you care about the people that you work with as well. That's completely understood. But apart from that, is there any other things that you're looking out for when you're interviewing people?
Well, we had some criteria. We had a remote working business. It had been remote. We'd been remote working for 10 years before COVID, and we had an amazing team. We had people that have been with us for years and years, and we wanted those people to remain. We did not want somebody coming in and stripping out the team and doing something entirely different. You know, we had a lot of loyalty. They had given us loyalty over the years, and we felt they really deserved that loyalty back. So we wanted somebody who would come in and take on the entire team and not really change anything, because we also felt a huge amount of loyalty to our owners, and we had over 160 owners at that time. So we had to we wanted the right people that would come into the company and take it forward, obviously bringing in new ideas, but along that journey not losing anybody, either staff or owners. And I have to say that we are coming up on 10 months now, 9 or 10 months since the company changed hands, and we have not they have not lost a single member of staff nor any owners. So it seemed to work.
Amazing.
We found the right people.
And I think, I mean, that's a testament to building a great business. Regardless, you look after your people, you look after your owners, and that's kind of your lifeblood, and that's something that's going to keep on going regardless, you know, post sale or into that sales process, and that's what helps you to get to there. So it's a philosophical thing which I completely understand and agree with. And so these 50 people that applied, so to speak. Now, I would imagine that with your level of experience in the industry, you would probably know a lot of potential leads and prospects for this company to say, hey, we think that these are the potential buyers. You know, you're even putting it up on social, saying we're looking to sell or that sort of thing. So those two things, the 50 people, where do they come from? And were you part of that sales process trying to find more prospects?
Well, once we realised that there was a big demand for the company, we were then able to really whittle that list down. And there were people that we knew were going to lowball from the very outset. They weren't interested in the price that we were asking. So they went out to start with, and then it really came down to about half a dozen that showed real promise. There were a couple from the US. There was a couple of very well-known companies from the US that you would, I won't mention them, but you would certainly recognize them. And then it came down to 2 or 3 from Canada. But there was one interview that we had. Craig and I sat with these 3 guys, and we talked, and they were so enthusiastic and so motivated. And the thing was is that they had no experience in the short-term rental business at all. And that was, oh my gosh, you know, how are they going to do this? But in fact, it worked out. You know, we decided, we came off that call and we said, this is it. These are the people that we want to sell our company to.
So, and what proportion of these potential buyers, what proportion were, I'd say, already professionals, and what proportion were, I guess, from other spaces? What are the kind of what did it slosh around to be in terms of that pack of the 40?
Probably only about 10%, I would say, had experience in the business at all. And we had a couple of our previous guests, who thought this was such a great idea. A couple of our owners who thought that, you know, they would like to get in on this, and I honestly thought that at the outset that we would be selling to one of our owners. But in fact, it didn't work out that way. But yes, it was only a very small amount had experience in the business and came with, and I think to a degree that was a huge benefit, that they didn't come with any preconceived ideas. We were able to explain the business. Both Craig and I stayed within the business. I mean, Craig is still in it. Craig is still working for them 10 months later. I probably lasted we were meant to be there for a year. I lasted about 4 months when I said, you guys don't need me anymore.
Wow. Okay, so this is incredible. Such a great journey, and I've learned so much, and I'm so surprised. The reason why I asked before, I asked about, did you provide leads? Were they industry type folk? Saying no. The last thing I'm going to ask is around that value proposition that you're going to provide to potential buyers, because we talked about a certain proportion being from the industry, so they might already understand what it is that they're potentially buying, and just look at the numbers, and then maybe even know you already, and be like, okay, I know what would I be prepared to pay for the business. But then obviously there's such an appeal to your business to 90% of people that aren't industry folk. What do you think it was that appealed to them with your business?
That's a difficult one. I mean, we sold to an investment company. Three entrepreneurs in their late 20s, who had a lot of experience in taking on small companies and growing them. They saw some. I mean, they did a huge amount of research, and I think that's what came across when we decided that this is the company that was going to buy ours. That they had done just a massive amount of research into the industry. So they'd researched the industry in the US and in Canada. I was talking to people, while we were going through this process. I was talking to people, well-known people in the industry, Andrew McConnell from rented.com. And they'd got in touch with him. They'd been through all my podcasts, and they were getting in touch with the people that I'd spoken to. And not to ask about my business, but to ask about the business in general.
Yeah.
And they wanted to learn about it, and they were getting excited about it. And to give them their due, they're still excited about it.
Yeah. So I guess from what you're saying is that there's no one key area that you're saying this is what you have to do to sell. You're just saying have your numbers sorted, have all your things sorted, and then you go out to market, and then it's only at that point you're really going to know what it is because it's going to appeal to different people and different institutions in different ways.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think there is a formula for for finding the right buyer. I mean, you might say, well, okay, well, I'm happy to sell to Vacasa, or Casago is going to come along and suck us up as well. I mean, we'd made a decision that we didn't want to go that route anyway. We didn't want to sell to any form of consolidator or become part of a big company. We just wanted to find somebody that would take it on like Craig and I had, and it would be their baby.
Yeah.
And that's what has happened. And I have to say it's way exceeded my expectations as to how it would be. And I think it's because the buyers came in with they didn't have preconceived notions of what this was all about.
Yeah.
They didn't come in and say, okay, this is Airbnb, we don't have to do anything and it's all passive income. They were ready to roll up their sleeves and bring an injection of new energy.
Yeah.
And it's very different now. But it's the same, if you see what I mean. They haven't really. In certain areas, they've changed nothing, and in other areas, I am seeing this great curve upwards as they grow. They've done a lot of growth in this last year, and they've been tremendous at it.
Yeah, and look, I know that for businesses, when you buy them, you've got to find ways to add value to it, and if you're not going to add any value, then probably don't bother, because you're not going to do too well with it. But Heather, we are out of time. Unbelievable information, unbelievable story. I couldn't think of a better person to have had the success that you've had. You're sharing, you're giving, you want to help people, and it's completely understandable as to why you've managed to get yourself out of that particular part. Now you're imparting your skills and helping others. And I'm sure that even the project of education and training for you, yes, there will be a money side of it, but actually if you can help strengthen other people along the way, especially with all of the skill sets that you've built up, I imagine that that's the journey. So if people want to join you on that journey, what would they do?
They can get in touch with me directly, and you've got my email address to add to your show notes, heather@vacationrentalformula.com. So what we're doing is we've created the Vacation Rental Formula Business School, and I'm creating courses. I work closely with my co-founder, who's my son, Mike, who has also been in the training business for a lot of years, but he comes from the safety side. He's a firefighter. So he and Justin Ford are actually working, they've worked together to create some material. And then we're bringing in some of the best training in the industry. So we're selecting people that have a really good track record in offering training and education, who have been in the business a while, haven't just jumped into it, know what they're talking about, and are bringing their experience. So we're going to be curating the best education that's out there and putting it all together in one place. And that will be the Vacation Rental Formula Business School. New website is going to be launched in early May. And we're super excited about that. We have a beta program going on at the moment. We're just to have 30 students on that, and we're up to just the early 20s now. So that's still open. So go to vacationrentalformula.com, and you can go to the business school and find out a little bit more about that. We'd love to see more people on there.
Beautiful. And look, I'm very excited about that. I'm excited to get involved. I want to have a look at these programs, and it's continuous education, which makes us stronger, and that sense of community, which I'm sure will be built through there as well. Heather, you are amazing. I'm so glad that we did this. And I've already got 10 other ideas for episodes that we could do in the future. If I can get your time later on, I will try my best. But once again, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure, Bart. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. And if you have been listening or watching, don't forget to like and subscribe. But I would like to get your feedback. I would like to get your comments and let us know if this episode provided any value to you at all. Take care. Have a good day, everyone.